Hey, I'm Eddie Tuduri. The reason I tell you that is because I'm not exactly a household name. And I'm from a small town in Connecticut called Derby, Connecticut, about 60 miles from the Bronx. I started playing drums at 9 years old. So I remember signing up for drum lessons in school, in grammar school. And then, I fell for it right away. And then by the time I was 12, I was working and studying with a teacher named Al Gardella. He's a great guy, great drum teacher, taught me all the basics. And at 12 years old, I played my first wedding. By the time I was 16, I had a record deal in New York with the local band I was in. And we were signed to Teddy Randazzo. And he signed us to Roulette Records, which was of a certain ilk. I mean, let's say I don't know, if Don Corleone recorded a record, it would have been on roulette, right? We worked the local circuit. By 1965, I guess it was, I got my first sort of big gig with a group called Cannibal and the Headhunters. We toured with Cannibal in that tri-state area, and that was a lot of fun too. Uh, and my first taste of the big time. I remember how scared I was the first time they opened the curtains at the Brooklyn Fox, and there was I don't know 1,500 people. I never played in anything but a block dance, so that was pretty exciting for me. By the time I was near 20 years old, we were already touring, and we had a band called Smack. So we had a '56 Chevy panel truck and a Corvette, and we piled everything in the. I drove the truck, and we drove across country. It ended up uh, in Venice Beach, California, in 1968. I had 60 cents. And we had been rifling grocery stores to eat, stealing bologna and white bread so we could make it across the country. Okay. We made it. We ended up in Venice. Long story short, the band broke up and went home, but I stayed there. I was hooked. One thing led to another. I finally got out of my car. I was living in my car. I finally got to a little house in Sherman Oaks. And I was practicing hours and hours every day. And then, little by little, I was getting gigs and working and starting to record some, and I made a living. People ask me what, or think that, they think I'm successful. I said, the only thing I would mention about success is that yes, after all these years looking back at my life, I paid the rent playing drums my whole life. I've never really been a star. I'm a side man. I played with a lot of people, but they were the stars, and I got paid, and I paid the rent. I always had a roof over my head and a car to drive, you know. So that's my definition of success. I got a call one day from a guy named George Greif. George said, "Can you be in London in a week to open this show with Bobby Whitlock? His band is already there, and we just want to know if you can make it." And I was like, "London? Oh my God, really?" I said, "Yes." I didn't even know what the music was or what anything was. Somebody recommended me, and I got the gig, and I was scared. I didn't really know. I'd never been overseas. It was pretty scary. And then I got to London. The band wasn't there. They were in France. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what the money was worth. I think I had about $60 American on me. I had to stay in this hotel for 4 or 5 days on my own. Finally, they came from France, and we played around London, did some BBC stuff, and I forget what, some interviews, TV shows, and then we flew from London to Chicago, Chicago to LA, and we went home. I got married, and while we were on a break, And then we went on a tour of North America with Bobby. I remember Bobby bought me this black Edwardian suit for my wedding, and my wife Linda had a beautiful. It was a great wedding. All my friends came, and we played, and the next day we left for the road. I was gone for 2 or 3 months. I forget. My first really long tour. After that North American tour, I don't remember what we got stopped for at the border trying to come back from Canada, but Keith was deported, some discrepancy with his paperwork. Rick was frustrated and went back to Philadelphia. I went back to LA. Bobby and I flew to LA. And so there I was, and Joey Vieira, who is the producer of Drum Drops, which I later did. But he brought us in the studio in Sound City when it was brand new. So we were the first people to ever record there. And then one thing led to another and another and another. And I said yes to everyone. That's what any advice I give to young folks these days. Is that somebody asks you to play, even if there's no money, just say yes. Just show up. Show up with a good attitude and try to fit in and try to play for the music. And in 1974, I got a call to join the Stone Canyon Band with Rick Nelson. I wasn't sure I could hang because I didn't know a lot about country music. But I took the job. It was a great band, great people. Because I was always swinging everything and playing, R&B or pop or funk music. I had to learn to straighten out my groove to be able to play the country grooves. So they at least resemble the country groove. After a year and a half, Rick approached me one day and said, "You know, Eddie, Hello, Mary Lou is starting to sound like a James Brown tune. So I think you should probably quit. So I think I need to get a country drummer." And he was right. I was kind of bored with it musically, but it was time for me to move on. And I got a gig with J.D. Souther, and it was as a special guest on the Eagles tour on the Hotel California tour in 1976. The first 4 nights were sold out at the Forum in Los Angeles. Then we had a few days off before we were flying to the first gig, Albuquerque. And I had a gig we were leaving on Wednesday. On Tuesday night, I took a gig at this blues bar in Pasadena for $40. And people said, "You're crazy. What are you doing? Tomorrow you're going to be on a Learjet flying." I said, "Yeah, but when that's over, this blues bar is still going to be here. That gig is going to be done. So you still have to pay the rent." And that led to a phone call from a bass player named Tim Bogert. They had auditioned 37 drummers and they couldn't find anybody that they liked. And the band was Tim and this little skinny singer kid from Visalia, Steve Perry, and Denver Cross was the guitar player. To look at Steve Perry, to look at all of us in those days and think, how could this voice come out of that guy? As soon as he opened his mouth, the first song we did, I went, "Oh my God, he's the best singer in this field I've ever heard." And we were very serious about that band. It was called Pieces. We were at Sound City and we recorded a song called "Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'" that Steve Perry wrote, which was Journey's biggest hit when he finally got in that band. But we did "Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'." We did a great rendition of it. Clive Davis, the Clive Davis, was there sitting on the couch. He listened to Steve Perry sing "Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'," and he turned around to us and our lawyer and he said, "I'm sorry, guys, I don't hear anything commercial here." And he left. And I think that became Journey's biggest seller, or the album that song was on. After a while, we kind of burnt out, and that was the end of that. there was a band called Waku. Actually, it was called the Big Waku. And it was David Palmer, who originally was a lead singer in Steely Dan. He sang "I Don't Want to Do Your Dirty Work." And the band was amazing. It was a pop band, all original tunes, a really great band. I auditioned for that band, got the job, and recorded their final record with them. One of the tunes went to #1 in Australia, so we were touring overseas, and we played on the steps of the Sydney Opera House to 150,000 people. Then we played Melbourne and Brisbane and Adelaide, all similar concerts, hundreds of thousands of people. It was great to have the #1 record in the country and feel like almost a Beatle for a few weeks, It was, I said, God, this is how it feels, because I was never a star. And we hung for about a year, and we did all the touring we could in America and Canada and elsewhere. And that band fell apart too. A lot of bands just fall by the wayside for one reason or another. It's usually egos or record companies or not enough work or. I would get a call, and of course, you have to pay the rent. So if you're a working musician, you need to play every genre, and you need to say yes a lot, even when you don't want to, because you got to pay the rent. So these country gigs, people would call me, and I'd go and audition. There could be 20 other, I don't care how many other drummers, I always got the gig because I played different. And the band would go, yeah, that feels great. That's really different. And these were top 40 bands, and they had to play the record like the record. Everybody in the audience knew every fill, every nuance. So I'd play with those bands for maybe a month, and they'd come to me and say, Eddie, you're not playing it like the record. I said, I know, that's why you hired me. I'm playing different. It's a different feel. And that was exciting to you guys in the beginning, but now you realize I told you I can't play country. And I would leave eventually. Nobody was ever angry. You would just come to the realization that this wasn't working out. But I kept getting those gigs. Decided at one point to move to Canada. There were a lot of great bands in Canada. I had done records. I did the 5-Man Electrical Band, Cooper Brothers. I did Chilliwack as a studio drummer. I flew up to Canada. The band was called the Lincolns. Prakash John was a bass player, killer bass player that I knew from LA. He had come to LA for a few years. And I played in that band for a little over a year, I think. The next band I joined was called the Downchild Blues Band. They were amazing. They are a staple in Canada. And everybody in Canada everywhere knows who Donnie Walsh and the Downchild Blues Band is. In fact, this is a little known fact, but if anybody remembers the Blues Brothers with Aykroyd and Belushi, Dan Aykroyd was a big fan, still is, of the Downchild Blues Band. And he used to go and sit in with them. He was their favorite band. So he modeled the Blues Brothers after the Downchild Blues Band. You had to be able to keep up with them drinking to get that gig, which, I just passed the bar, I think. And so there were a bunch of eclectic, crazy people, and I just loved it. That came to an end, and I ended up back in Los Angeles. I got home. I was home for 4 or 5 days, and I had this awakening. I had been to a club or a concert with my girlfriend Debbie, and we got a little high that night, and I was really kind of bent out of shape, and we went home that night. I woke up in the corner of the room all disheveled, and Debbie woke me up, and she was about to tell me about all the people I should apologize to because I was such an idiot. I said, you know what, Deb, don't tell me. I can't do this anymore. And so I called my friend David Palmer. He said, how you doing? I said, I'm not doing very well. I can't live like this anymore. I think something's got to change. And he said, all right, why don't you meet me tonight? You know, I knew he was sober for a few years. He said, why don't you meet me tonight at this place? I said, is that AA? And he said, yeah. I said, what's that going to cost me? And he said, you already paid, Eddie, in full. Just meet. So I went, and he sat me between him and his sponsor. And after that first meeting, I never touched another drink. It's been over 38 years now. And David is still my sponsor. And we still communicate, and he still helps me when I need to talk to somebody. It's like looking at the world through a new pair of glasses. Everything was different. Playing, obviously, after a little while, it got a lot better because I had energy, I had focus and attention, memory. It was just a real adjustment because at that time, and that was 38 years ago, at that time, most of my friends hadn't stopped. To be honest, I lost work because I wasn't using. I couldn't hang. And that wasn't because of my playing, which was even better at that time. It was because they didn't want a goody two-shoes guy around. Like I was I don't know how anybody could think that of me, but just because I didn't drink and use anymore. People I knew began to get sober, and then things changed for a lot of us and got a lot better. The music got better. For whatever reason, you know, your life changes entirely in sobriety. You're going in a different direction, in a positive direction, on a different path, and things get way, way better.